Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started here. Today's webinar is going to be covering SOLIDWORKS Electrical with a focus on an introduction or manufacturer parts 101. So to give you guys an overview of what all we're going to cover today, so that you kind of know what to expect and know when to ask questions, we're going to start by adding manufacturer parts to a project. How do we add them? How do we associate them to various items within the project? Then we're going to go over the manufacturer part library, how it's organized, how it's populated. Then we're going to go to different ways that that library can be organized, and we'll create manufacturer parts. We'll also create electrical assemblies, and then we'll discuss kind of a technique to mass import a bunch of manufacturer parts into the library using the import wizard. So that's kind of our workflow for today. There is a chat as well as a questions panel. If you have a question at any point, go ahead and type it in the questions, but I'll also keep an eye on the chat just in case someone puts anything in there. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing that we're going to discuss is just how are manufacturer parts added to a project. So what I have open right now is just a blank AMPC project. So there's nothing, there's no symbols, there's no anything really added to this. The first way that we're going to add a manufacturer part, I'm going to go through the normal workflow, and that is simply adding a symbol and then adding a manufacturer part and associating that symbol to a manufacturer part. Now, when we're doing this, what we're doing is we're accessing the graphic or the symbol from our symbols library. So I'm looking at the library tab, symbol management. So we're going to insert a symbol. Then we're going to tie that symbol to a manufacturer part from the manufacturer part library. So I'm just trying to be pretty clear about what we're doing. We're going to add two pieces of information from two different libraries, the symbol and the manufacturer part. So to do that, let's go to the schematic tab, which has all my schematic tools, and let's choose to insert a symbol, right? Now, when you insert a symbol, it's going to remember the last symbol that you inserted, or you can hit these ellipses to browse a symbol library. Now, I'm going to use the symbol that's already here, but just to show you as an example, let's go ahead and browse a library and find it. So I'm going to hit these ellipses, go other symbol. This symbol selector is bringing up my symbol library. Now, by default, it's coming into the filters. I'm going to go ahead and show the classifications first, which is the tab to the left. Now, these blue icons are all different classifications. You can just think of them as folders or ways to group and organize your libraries. In this case, we're looking at the symbol library. So the classifications are just to group and organize the symbols that we have. Now, to be able to find them, rather than browsing through each classification or each folder, we can use the filters tab, which came up by default. So any property or any item within that symbol is available for me to search. So if I know the title of the symbol, or maybe a description, who created it or modified it, or if it's tied to a manufacturer, any one of these things I can search. So I'm just going to look for the name of the symbol. It's actually right here, but I'm going to type in XLR and choose this XLR male connector. So I'm going to double click to select it, and I'm going to place this symbol on one of my grid dots. Right, just makes things, if I were to continue drawing more circuitry, makes things a lot easier to line up and be able to connect properly. So I'm going to click and place it. Now, when we place the symbol, the first thing that we want to look at and review is the symbol properties. So this is coming from the symbol library, and we have two choices. When we want to tie a manufacturer to this symbol, we can either utilize this panel over here on the right. And what this is your components list. So I'm going to show you where that is outside of this menu in a moment. But this is any component that's already been added to the project. And you can see they have filters for component types up here. But what this is used for, if I'm adding a symbol and associating this to an existing manufacturer part in my project, in that case, I would select this manufacturer part, and I would effectively have two graphics representing the same manufacturer part. So the quantity on that in my bill of materials would still be 1. I'm just showing that symbol in 2 different places. Maybe I'm drawing the part of the circuitry and in one symbol, and using some other connection points for the other symbol. But that's how to associate this to an existing component. Now for this example, we're going to tie in a new manufacturer part. So I'm going to clear out the information that just got populated by clicking this existing component, right? So we're just kind of resetting it as if I had just placed a symbol. To add a manufacturer part, I can come to the Manufacturer Parts and Circuits tab. Notice we do have some tools to create a manufacturer part kind of on the fly, if you will, and create a part or an electrical assembly, which we'll show how to do later. But for this, we're just going to simply search our manufacturer part library. So once I hit search, the behavior works the same way as searching and finding a symbol. So the manufacturer parts, if I click on the classification tab, are also organized by those blue classifications or folders, right, to organize the library. And we have the filters that we can use to search and find specific manufacturer parts. I'm going to go ahead and remove or reset these filters to clear it out. And for this example, I have a part number that I'm going to use. And the reason why I'm using a certain part number, which I will emphasize a little bit later in the webinar, is the manufacturer part that I'm typing in has circuitry that will match the symbol that I'm adding or associating this to. So to add a manufacturer part and associate it to this symbol, I can highlight it and hit the green plus, or what I typically do is just double click it. To know it's associated, you'll see it populate down here in this window, and I can just hit select to get out of it. So now I know this SAPT part number is associated to the symbol that we're inserting. I'll go ahead and click OK and exit out of my insert symbol menu. So now I can see I have a symbol with manufacturer part information added, right? So again, that workflow was to insert a symbol, which grabbed a symbol from my symbol library, and then we took an extra step and gave it more information to populate our bill of material and associated a manufacturer part, right? The other way to add manufacturer parts to your project is without even using a symbol. So to do that, I'm going to go to the components panel. So at the top of my tree on the left-hand side, by default, we're typically looking and navigating our documents, or they call it the documents panel. The tab to the right of that is the components panel. So this is a list of every component or manufacturer part that has been added to this project. If you don't see the components panel, we can go to the view tab, and we have this little middle section of this menu of all these dockable panels. The component browser is right here, so you can turn it on and off just by clicking it. So looking at this components panel, the way that these components are organized is by locations, right? We can see component J1, right, that we just added in here, and I had already had another manufacturer part for a PLC. So as I was saying, we can add more manufacturer parts directly from this component panel without a graphic. So this is a good example of something that You can use, maybe I've seen customers use it for like quoting purposes if they would just want to build out a bill of material but not really do any drafting or drawing work. This is a great way to do that. We can simply add them straight to our components panel and output a bill of material. The way this is done is by first just selecting the location. It has to know where this component belongs. So I have this main location by default in the project, and what we do is we right click on that and we'll say new component manufacturer part. So I'm going to directly add a manufacturer part from this component panel by just clicking that. And then that brings up our manufacturer part library for us to then search and add another manufacturer part into the project. So I'm just going to add a random one here. Let's add a connector. And I'm going to double click to add that. Same way as we did before. You can double click or hit this green plus with the part selected to add it. When we do it this method, because it's not tied to a specific symbol, it's going to ask how many of these components do you want to add, right? So we get an opportunity to pick the quantity. I'm going to add one and say, okay. So then we can see we now have this component added to our component list. Now, the only thing about adding a component this way is you'll notice that there's a small, it may be hard to see through the webinar thing, but there's a small infinity symbol at the bottom of that component icon. And that's just because we inserted it straight from the component panel. To get rid of this, that is considered a permanent component. So to delete that out of our project, we first want to right click on the component and say set it as non-permanent. That'll get rid of that infinity symbol, and you can go ahead and delete the component if you like. Okay, so it's just one extra click to be able to get rid of it or scrub that out of the project should we need to. And the next thing that we're going to discuss is the manufacturer part library itself. So we've gone over how do we add a manufacturer part to the project. Now let's dive into look at the library organization itself. So to do that, I'm going to go to the library tab, and we have our manufacturer part library, manufacturer part manager. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And as we discussed, this looks very similar to how it looks in the search menu, only you have a couple more options for adding and importing. But here's the classifications, or the way that these are grouped, right? And we have filters to be able to search our library, as we've already shown. The first way to kind of get this a little bit organized for your own company needs is maybe you want to add a classification, right? So how do I know if a classification is custom or if it's a default installed or out of the box classification? If you see a little man or a person icon over the classification, that means it's a user or custom classification, not default installed, right? To add a classification, we actually need to go to the classification library or classification manager. Now they've given us a quick access so we can go to that classification and add more or make modifications right here and access it from the manufacturer part library, or you'll notice on my library tab, you can go straight to it from here without getting to the manufacturer part library first. But I'm going to go ahead and open it up from the manufacturer part library, and you can see the classifications listed over here on the left. To create a new classification, we would say new classification, fill out all the properties. If you have a specific root mark, those kind of ideas. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but this is how you create a classification. Just keep in mind, I guess the biggest thing out of here is that each classification has to have a different root mark. So we'll come back to how root marks are applied in a few moments. But just keep in mind, you can't, double up and have two of the same root marks for separate classifications. So sometimes, I'll get people that are new to the software and they will start creating a bunch of classifications for every type of component they have. But then they run into the issue of, hey, well, I've used up all my single letters and I'm getting to double letters and things are confusing with my root marks. So that's not really the best practice for adding a bunch of manufacturer parts and finding them easily within your own environment. A better way to do that would be to use libraries. So I'm going to quickly go over how to create a library and then how you can use that, since that's our preferred method to organize our own internal manufacturer parts. So I'm going to exit out of the classification manager. I'm not going to create a classification for this. To create a library, on our library manager tab, we can go to library management, right? We can look at existing libraries that are already there or create our own internal company library. So to do that, I'm going to say new. We can give the library a name, a description, which I'll reuse. And then other than that, we just need to pick and choose what types of items are allowed to belong in this library. So I'm going to leave them all selected, but you could filter out for any one of these by deselecting this checkbox and just picking the items that you want, right? But you can use symbols, title blocks, macros, cables, and manufacturer parts. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, create that library. It should populate down here at the bottom. And now we have a place or a way to filter and find company-specific manufacturer parts. So rather than creating a classification that has its root mark and all that kind of stuff, instead, what I've done is just created a library. And let's say I want to go use a manufacturer part, right? Let me just place another one. If I go search, now that library is a searchable field. This does not impact the root mark of the component or anything like that. I could just come in here and say, hey, I want to filter for, instead of this would be your company name theoretically, or maybe even an internal customer. Maybe you have a bunch of manufacturer parts that you use for one customer A, and then customer B uses a bunch of other ones, however you want to organize your libraries, but it's searchable. It really is the point of this, right? So having a library set up will help organize, keep your company data and manufacturer parts organized. So that's a little bit about the structure, how to organize, find your manufacturer part once they're there. Now let's dive in and actually create some manufacturer parts and populate libraries in different ways. So I'm going to go back to the library tab. I'm going to go to the manufacturer part manager. First thing to do, let's say I'm trying to build some schematic documents, is just search the library. There is everything that you see in my menu here that doesn't have this little man icon. Again, that indicates it's a user created classification. The rest of these components, I would say 99.9% of my library is all out of the box just by installing. Now, that doesn't mean every component is going to be in there, but it's a good idea to first look, of course. So you would simply come in, go to the filters tab, and use whatever piece of information you have as the filter to find the manufacturer part that you're looking for. Down here in the manufacturer part area, maybe I know the manufacturer, maybe I know the part number, maybe I know a couple of pieces of things. Something else that'll help is I leave automatic refresh on. If you turn this off, then in order to search, you have to hit the button. So like, as an example, let me type something in. Now I have to hit search in order for it to execute. But if you keep automatic refresh on, then as you're typing and doing things, then it'll start updating as you go. So that's just a preferred thing navigation-wise. So you would search the library, see if you can find it. If not, then let's look at the next easiest way to bring manufacturer parts into our library. The next easiest way would actually be this tool up here called the Electrical Content Portal. So when you click on this, it'll present you with a login screen, which I've already logged in, just in case I forgot my password, but I didn't this case. So this is a website by SOLIDWORKS in partnership with with a bunch of electrical manufacturers. This is actually populated by the manufacturers themselves. And the way that this is populated is by customers or users requesting content. So if you don't find something in here, certainly request it. But there is a couple 100 million parts already in this library. So you can search this website, or the ECP as we call it for short, same way we would search the library itself using the filters. So if you have a manufacturer part number, a description, whatever you've got, go ahead and type it in this search up here and just find what you want. As an example, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you would bring one in. Let's say I found a manufacturer part from this website, right? Let me just go and grab anything. Let's go like ABB, right? Let's say I want to bring in whatever part this is. Looks like some kind of sensor. What I would do is first, I guess, let me explain that there's different items from the ECP may have different pieces of information. This icon is for a manufacturer part, though some of them you'll notice may also have a symbol. It may have a 2D footprint. It may have a 3D file. There's different pieces to that manufacturer part that the manufacturer may or may not provide. This example, we're going to focus just on the manufacturer part, but the way that you would import this or workflow would be the same. The only difference would be if it's a symbol, then I would import it in the symbols library rather than the manufacturer part as an example. But for this, let's go ahead and get this manufacturer part into our library so it's usable. So to do that, I would just hit download. It says, hey, you got to log in to download it, of course. But we'll show you another one. So if you go to the downloads folder, it'll show up something like, let me find one, something like this. Okay. It'll have a SOLIDWORKS electrical file extension. And typically for a manufacturer part, rather than a macro here, it'll be whatever the number is .part in here. And that's how you know it's a manufacturer part. I can look at this file and know it's a macro just from this in here. But once you have it downloaded from our manufacturer part library, we would simply go to unarchive. Now, hopefully you're familiar with the term archive and unarchive in electrical. It's kind of like unzipping and zipping, but that's how files or various database items are shared amongst people. So when we hit download, it actually downloaded an archive. So to bring it into our library, we would say unarchive, go to the downloads folder and just click on whichever file we're trying to bring in. Here's a part. We'll bring this one in. So just say open, and it's going to recognize all the information in there. So it looks like the one I selected had a lot of manufacturer parts. Came with some 2D footprints, and you can pick and choose using these filters about how you want to bring that in, right? Do you want to replace if you've already got one? Do you want to add it or do nothing? And once you get to the end of this selection, you just hit finish and it brings it in. So that's how you import one, is by going to the ECP or content portal, searching for whatever you're looking for, hitting download. And then once you've got it downloaded, to bring it into our library, we're going to click unarchive and then select the file and follow the filters to import that into our library. Any questions so far? Go ahead and type them in the chat. So that's the next easiest way, if we don't already have it, is to look in the electrical content portal. There's another way to bring in parts, but I'm going to show you that piece at the end because it's more of a mass import using the import wizard. So the next way to add manufacturer part information to our library is to simply create it from scratch, right? When I create this manufacturer part, I'm first going to pick a classification that I want the new part to be grouped or organized and belong to. So for this, I think I have a test classification out here. It's empty. There's no parts in it. So we'll just use that. So to create a new manufacturer part, I'm going to go to the Add Manufacturer Part icon, and first just make sure that I'm selecting to add a part. We'll go through an example of creating an assembly afterwards. But for this example, let's go ahead and add a manufacturer part. When we do that, I want to start on the farthest left tab first and kind of work my way to the right. So this first tab is the manufacturer part properties. We want to fill out all these properties. So as an example, we'll go through a bunch of these. Let's say the part number for this manufacturer part, 8675309. I think I've already got one of those. So I'll add a few digits. We'll add the manufacturer, whoever makes it. You can also use this drop down if it's an existing manufacturer to just select it to make sure it's typed and spelled the same. Then the classification will already be populated by which one is selected when you said to create a new part. If you want to change it, you can just hit the ellipses and choose a different one. Then here's that library, right? So I can add this new manufacturer part straight to my company specific library and hit the drop down. Let's go and find that library. Next is just picking the component type. So it's a PLC, module, whatever you've got. The next step is an article number. Now this field is typically used for an internal part number. So if you have your own company specific part number for that manufacturer part, this would be the best place to use that. I'll type something in. If you want to exclude it from bill of materials or have some kind of external ID, feel free. It's not as common to fill these out. Though if it's part of a series, you can include that series number. And we also have an opportunity to add a spec sheet or a data sheet for this, right? This is very convenient because I can hit the ellipses and grab the PDF from the manufacturer or whatever type of information that I need to put this. This doesn't have to be an electrical document. Like I said, it can be a PDF, it could be Excel, it could be a picture, whatever you've got. Oh, I thought I had a question. That's my favorite example part number. So you can add that spec sheet right here. Now the next thing is the mark root, right? Now I discussed the mark root briefly when we discussed classifications, and in that we said that every classification has its own root mark. Now there is a hierarchy to how root marks are assigned to symbols or components within a project. So this is important. If you're taking some notes, it might be a good thing to jot down. Whenever we insert a symbol into our project, that's going to be the first place that the project looks to assign a root mark, right? So I'm going to hit OK and come back to this. So if I go to my symbols library, if I were to create a new symbol, notice how there's a field to assign a root mark. So if the symbol that you've added has a root mark, then that's what it's going to use. That will take precedence over anywhere else that the root mark could be defined, such as the manufacturer part or the classification, right? So if this is filled out, no matter what, this is the root mark that's going to be tied to that symbol. If that is not filled out, like in the symbol that I just opened, then the second place electrical will look would be at this manufacturer. So there's a couple schools of thought as far as, whether using multiple symbols or multiple manufacturer parts for the same symbol or vice versa. But whenever we insert that symbol, it's going to look at the symbol. If it doesn't have a root mark, it's going to look at if it has a manufacturer part associated. If it does, then it's going to look at what this root mark is telling it to be. If both of these are blank, the symbol and the manufacturer part are blank, then it's going to, by default, assign it some sort of root mark, and that'll come from the classification itself. All right. So if you're making some notes, root mark is assigned by symbol, next by manufacturer part, and lastly by the classification. Okay. So in our manufacturer part we're creating here, we can also give it a description. I'm going to say connector 5,000. Sure. If we have a certain supplier or stock number that we need to order this from, we can include that as well. Down here at the bottom, I'll come back to this section. We can just fill out, some properties about it, voltage, envelope, sizes, whatever. I'm going to leave that blank for our example. And the next biggest section is this illustration section. So what this is for, if we want to use a certain type of illustration anytime this manufacturer part is used, then we would tie that to this manufacturer using these ellipses here. So if I have a specific line diagram symbol I always want to use whenever this manufacturer part is added to the project, then I would go hit the ellipses and pick which one that's supposed to be. Right? Same thing goes for if I have a specific symbol, like a schematic symbol that I want to use for this. And here's another big piece. If we're doing 3D, harnessing, cabinet layouts, anything with SOLIDWORKS mechanical, this is how electrical and mechanical play nice together. This is how it knows which 3D file is associated to this manufacturer part. We can also tie a specific 2D footprint or any other illustration type that you see in this section. Moving to the right, the tab to the right, this isn't used very often, though you can if you don't have fields in here that you want to fill out. They're not available. There's a user data tab. Since it's not as common, we're going to blaze over it and get to the more important piece, which is actually circuits and terminals. So in order for this to work with our symbols, to be able to add wires to all of that, we need to have a symbol, right? That symbol will have circuits and terminals, connection points. Those must match the manufacturer part. So manufacturer part is kind of the governing piece of that. The circuits are what they are, right? Then we would create a symbol that satisfies whatever those circuits are from the manufacturer part, and that will ultimately result in a good connection. I'll come back to this in a few moments. Let's add some circuits first. So you can add a couple at once or do them one by one. So I'm just going to do one by one for this example. I'm going to add a circuit, and we'll see that gives it the circuit here and the terminals within that circuit down below, right? So before we get to the terminals, let's define the correct circuit type. If you hit the drop-down arrow, you'll see all the available circuit types. Sometimes I'll notice this list will be foreshortened. It'll only have like a few in here. If that happens, just click on this more circuit types and then click the drop-down again, and that should make all of them available. But we'll pick a circuit type, whether it's normally open, normally closed, it's a motor, whatever that is supposed to be, right? I'm going to use terminal, which is most common for a connector. And the next thing is to add additional circuits if you have them, or if there's only one circuit, to add the terminals. right? So that's what we're going to do in our example. We're going to create one circuit with multiple terminals or multiple connection points. So to do that, you can see I have this add icon. I've already got one because you got to have one by default at least. So let's go ahead and add a second terminal or connection point and a third. So I'll point out how this impacts things in a moment once we get finished creating this manufacturer part. But note that this is actually creating an index, right? So I have circuit 0 and then just a counter for each terminal number. Now this is not how the terminals are labeled, right? That's what this mark field is used for. So the terminal mark is defined right here at the manufacturer part. So I had a connector up there with 3 connection points. So I'm just going to define, I have one circuit with 3 terminals or 3 connection points in here. So what do I want each of those 3 to be labeled? Let's do a positive, negative, and then just a weird one, right? Just so we know that we're looking at mine. Right, so that's how the mark is applied for that connection point. If we move further to the right, there's 2 ways to define a wire termination. This is one of those. So you would hit this box right here and go browse the wire termination type library, pick whichever one you're looking for, whatever you want. And that's how that wire termination is added to there. It's not required, but you can define a maximum number of wires for each terminal. And you can put, maximum wire section, just some other requirements. This would show up like in a design rule check if you executed one later in the project for too many wires connected to a terminal, for example. Well, how does it know too many are connected? That comes from the circuit and the terminal right here. That's how that gets populated. I'll leave those for now. So what we've done is we filled out the manufacturer part properties starting from the top, worked our way down, and then we, at a minimum, also define the circuits and terminals for this manufacturer part. So let's go ahead and click OK. We can see it here in the library. And I want to come back to that circuits and terminals. I'm going to delete out this symbol and let's re-add it so I can discuss that circuits and terminals. I'm not going to search the library this time. It'll bring up the last symbol I used, which is what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click and place it. And this time, instead of going straight and adding that manufacturer part, I'm going to just click OK. So we don't have any manufacturer part data tied to the symbol right now. I'm going to open up and review this symbol. So I'm going to right click on my symbol, go to the symbol flyout and open symbol. Now I know this webinar isn't designed to really cover symbols and stuff, but this is important at least to show of how it relates to the manufacturer part. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through this briefly. On the left, we can see, you can add new circuits or new terminals or connection points, just like we did with the manufacturer here. That's how this was created. And if I look at this, I have one circuit with 3 connection points, which is the reason why I just set up our dummy manufacturer part with the same way. Because we always want those circuit definitions to match, right? So this has one circuit, those 3 terminals. So when I look at the symbol that's in my project, I'm going to get warnings or red circuit states or maybe a different color if the circuit in my manufacturer part doesn't match that symbol that we just added. So I'm going to get back into the symbol and let's add the manufacturer part. So let's go to, you can get there either way. You can go to symbol properties or component properties. Either menu will get there. If you go symbol properties, that's just like you adding the symbol for the first time. If you go the other way to component properties, it's Instead of the symbol info, it just has the mark info here. But either way, this is the tab that we're looking for, manufacturer parts and circuits, right? Down here, you're seeing the circuits in the manufacturer part. Let's go ahead and add a in the symbol, let's go ahead and add a manufacturer part to that. So let's reset the filters. Right, and rather than browsing my library browsing the classifications, because we created a company specific library, I'm going to use that as a filter. So I'll come down here, go to this, and I don't even need to add anything else because that's the only one in that one. So here's that part that we created. Now when I highlight it, notice that there's a circuit state over here in green, right? So there's hopefully you've taken the schematics class, but there's basically 4 different states of the circuit. If the circuit between the manufacturer part and the symbol match, then you'll see green, which is what you want. If it's red, then that means the circuit definition between the symbol and the manufacturer part are different, or they don't match in some way. So red's no good. If it's blue, that means that you have an available circuit in the manufacturer part that's not being used in the symbol, right? It's available, but there's no mismatch or anything like that. The last one is a virtual circuit, which is not quite as common, but as a best practice, you want these to always be green, or you want them to always match, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and double click to add that manufacturer part associated to the symbol, just as we've done, and I can see that circuit state down here. Let's click OK. And we can see that because we added that manufacturer part, I'm getting some stuff from the attributes in the symbol, such as the manufacturer, part number, description, and we also get our positive, negative, I just explained that, negative and positive, and our super circuit here, which is the terminal mark assigned to that manufacturer terminal. So just to reiterate that, let me go right click, I'm gonna go to component properties, manufacturer parts, highlight our part, click on the properties to review, go to the circuits tab, select the circuit, and that's right here. This is where those got assigned at, right? Positive, negative, super, right? So making these match is important, right? It'll show up on reports properly. Things won't yell at you, it'll be good. So we've created a manufacturer part. We discussed some circuit states, matching the symbol. Let's go ahead and create a assembly. And then lastly, we'll go over importing a mass amount of manufacturer parts at the same time with the import wizard. So let's create an assembly. I'm gonna go back to the library tab and manufacturer part library or manager. The way that we create assembly is very similar. So I'm gonna pick a classification. I'm gonna use the test class and go to add manufacturer part. And this time, make sure I hit the drop down and choose that I wanna create an assembly. So we'll select assembly. I'm gonna do the same things, just start from the left, work our way. So the assembly properties are the same, right? There's not really anything different here. So we'll just punch in some stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and add it to my library as well, just to clean things up. Notice how to automatically default to an electrical assembly component type. Again, with the article number, that's an internal part number field that we would want to use. Same thing goes for the root, everything else. Let's put in test assembly, right? So properties pane is the same. The difference is here. Instead of defining circuits, right, to an individual manufacturer part, we're just gonna pick manufacturer parts to build this electrical assembly, right? So if you click on this, then we'll go to add, and that just brings up your library to go pick, search, and build this assembly however you want. So let's just go ahead and add a couple parts in here. Let's do this one and this one. Super. Makes no sense, but you get the idea here. You can add as many parts as you want. If you need to reorder them, you can highlight it and change the order here. Sometimes that may be common for, like, if you have a connector housing and then pins is different parts, you may build it as an assembly. You probably want that connector to be the first one in there, but that's how you can change the order for this manufacturer part assembly. Okay, once we're done, we'll just click OK, and now we have this assembly. All right. So the last thing that we want to cover is how to populate your manufacturer part library and really import a bunch of items at once. And that's what this import icon is for, right? So what this is we can import a list or a ton of manufacturer part information from Excel. This is great because you may have a legacy project with an output of Excel. We can use that output to import and populate our manufacturer part library. Or if you don't have anything legacy, but you just have a bunch of stuff that you want to input, rather than going one by one, we can just fill out all the stuff that we input in Excel and then do it all at once. How do you exclude parts within an electrical assembly from the bill of material? I want the electrical assembly on the BOM, but not the individual parts. That would be in the report. Let's look at what the report is. Let's see. So I'm going to go to my report manager and let's add one. All right, so there should be a filter. So like this one is a bill of materials with electrical assemblies. Another way to do this, if you have an existing bill of materials, would be to modify and customize that report. Like, let's say I have this bill of material group by manufacturer. You can add a filter on it and filter for assemblies or component types. So I'm going to get into that report configuration, that property. Here's a filter, right? You can say filter for an assembly. So that would only show up in your bill of material if it has this assembly definition. Does that answer your question, Travis? Just let me know. Got another question here. Can you use electrical assemblies for something like a purchase cable? Yes, but it would be better to define that in your cable library. So if I go to the library tab, here's a cable, right? You can add a manufacturer part number directly to the cable, and that would probably be a better workflow. Cool, just let me know if you have something more specific or like a certain report. Here, let me put my email in the chat in case y'all don't have it. All right, I'll put it in the chat. Kind of getting low on time here. Let me go ahead and show how to do that mass import, and then we'll have a few minutes left for questions. So as I was saying, let's say I have an output from some kind of legacy project, or I just don't want to add them all one by one. This is a much faster way to add a bunch of manufacturer parts. So what I did is just opened up a blank Excel and just gave this Excel sheet some columns, right? So I gave it a column for the part number, a manufacturer, a description, and really that's all you need as a minimum. You could get rid of anything else. Of course, you can add anything else that you want to this, and that'll be added to that manufacturer part, right? So each one of these rows is going to be a different manufacturer part. So to bring this in, let me go ahead and exit out of Excel. Let's go to our manufacturer part library and go back to import, or go to import. Let's say import, and it's asking for the file or data source, right? So I'm going to click on this icon for what Excel file I want, and let's go find it. There it is. Excuse me. And before we get into actually converting the data, we'll notice that there is this import configuration. I'll come back to this at the end. If you're doing this as initial, the first time you're doing this import, just leave it on. If you find one, like let's say you have legacy AutoCAD data, then of course just choose the AutoCAD. But if not, you just have like a straight bill of materials that you just built in Excel on your own, that's fine too. You can just leave this alone. At the end of this import process, you can save your selections, and that'll make this much faster the next time you import using Excel. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So for now, let's go ahead and just go to next. All we did was just pick the Excel. Let's go ahead and hit next. And over here on the data range, I just had one sheet in that Excel, but you could have had multiple, right? Make sure you're on the right sheet. And then the next step is, are we trying to import an electrical assembly or define and import a bunch of manufacturer parts? I'm going to do a bunch of manufacturer parts, right? We'll go ahead and hit next, right? Then the next thing this is looking for is just title rows, or like it's trying to map where's the actual data and what's just the labels for the rows and that kind of idea. So I'm going to say there's one title row, right? Just this top one where I labeled what each one of these columns are, and all this data, is not in bold, which is what I want. Go ahead and go to next. And this is the last piece where all the magic happens. So what we see over here on the left is the intelligence or the fields from SOLIDWORKS Electrical. And we're going to map those to the fields for each one of these columns that we have in Excel. So to do that, all we have to do is drag and drop them onto the appropriate column. So in this example, I'm just going to grab, here's my part number or reference. Here's my manufacturer. Here's my description, pick English. And you can just continue down the row and just map all your properties, right? Width, let's say inches, so on and so forth. So once you get done mapping the properties, and this could be, whatever properties you're trying to include, so it may be different, but then we just hit next. And it's going to force you to do a compare. You just got to hit this icon because it's going to check and see if those parts are already part of your library, right? In this case, these are all new ones. So it's telling me I've got 12 new, nothing's updated or anything like that. I'm not modifying existing ones. So once you do that, then this import will be available, right? So you just hit import and away it goes. You just brought in, this could be 500 parts if you wanted. The last step to this wizard is the import configuration, that thing like at the very beginning that I said, if you have an AutoCAD or whatever, you can use it. The end result is you're going to map these however your Excel is, and hopefully you're kind of keeping a similar Excel template if you're viewing this more than once. So that way when you're importing, you can just click on your configuration, and when you get to this step, it already has all these fields mapped. So that's what I was saying, it saves you a lot of time for that. So if you want to save it, just hit the save and give that import configuration a name, right? I'll go ahead and hit import. Import is complete. We can say finish. And I don't know where I imported it. I probably put it in unclassified elements, but that's all it takes to, oh, here they are. It just imported all these. Y'all wouldn't have known that, but I just recognized it. So that's how we can use the import wizard to mass import and populate a bunch of our library all at once. I think that's kind of all I have time for. I'm going to look at the question. I know I've got a couple questions in the box that I haven't finished yet. I just want to make sure I got through everything. Yeah. So I'm going to answer some questions. I put my email up there in the chat. Shoot me an email. Travis just asked if he can email me. Yeah, shoot me an email if you can't figure it out. But biggest thing is I can't give you a direct answer because I don't know what report you're starting with. If you're starting with this one, it would, what you do, the exact clicks would be different than if you're starting with a bill of material that already has a filter for assemblies on it. But ultimately, in order to filter for only assemblies or ones that are the inverse of that, that would be in the report itself, your report configuration, this filters tab. So I'm just kind of showing the same thing again ultimately, but that's what we're looking for. Exact clicks, just let me know. Is there a way to delete system default components or cables? Yes. You would just delete them out of the library. So like if you go to your cable thing, you just delete it. Find what you don't want and delete it. Same thing with components from the manufacturer part library. Just come in and delete it. Looks like we're kind of getting close to top of the hour here. I'm not sure if this webinar is going to automatically end or not, but it might. So just, shoot me an email if I can help with anything. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar. I hope you got something out of it. Hopefully it clarified something for you. For classifications, yes, you can delete classifications. I think. Oh, no, you can't delete the system ones. That's right. You can delete custom ones if you created a classification, but you can't get rid of these. Just move them out of that and don't use it, I guess. Okay. Let me know, type a question in the chat. I'm about to end it, so speak now or shoot me an email. Are custom classifications available for everyone in your company? That's a yes and no question. Anybody can. There's nothing restricting it unless your installation is different. I'm going to go to Tools, Interface Configuration. There's a Rights Management. Now, I don't know if your company has this turned on or not, but this could prevent you from doing things. Let's turn this on. I don't remember. I haven't used this in a bit. I don't remember my password. I'm not going to mess with it right now. I'm running out of time, but I'll show you from the help menu. So within the user rights, basically you're defined as like a user or an admin, and then there's a bunch of checkboxes defining what you can and can't do. So I don't know if this is enabled within your company, like I said, but this would be something that could potentially prevent you from doing that. I wish I could open it up. Let me see if I can find you a better graphic. Here's the feature grid. Dang. I was just trying to get a list of all those available properties. I'm gonna have to search for it, but basically it's, can create projects, can create templates, can create manufacturer parts, can create classification. There's a whole gamut of lists of what a user can and can't do. So as long as user rights isn't turned on and restricting that, then I don't see why you couldn't, that anybody could create it. Oh, okay. So she's asking, like, if she creates a classification, will everybody else be able to see it? The answer is also going to be specific to your installation. If other users in your organization are all sharing the same database, then absolutely. You know, and same thing goes, like if I add a manufacturer part, as long as the other users are on the same database, then they'll automatically see that as soon as that part's added, right? Some companies, you know, they may have different locations that are on different databases or, you know, different scenarios. So that would be, you know, the only caveat to that. But as long as you're, what I would say, quote unquote, like a normal install where everybody at your company is all connected to the same database, then yes, if you create a classification, they should see it. Yeah, if you share one, then you should be good to go. Okie doke. I'm happy to answer any more questions, but I do need to end this webinar. Thanks for your participation and again for joining. Hope it helped. Hope it clarified some things. Shoot me an email if there's something else I can help with. And other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and a fantastic day. Thanks again.